never do. The old rain is always on the sea. And what will always bring to life. So get ready, get ready, 'cause here they come.
All right, good morning, everybody. Time to talk Syracuse football, basketball. Still basketball. We might delve into a little bit of football as well. But to bring along one of my favorite, he's an old colleague of mine, and he's been at this almost as long as I have, for crying out loud, covering Syracuse sports. Let's welcome in from Syracuse.com, the one, the only, Brent Axe. What's up, Brent? How are you?
Lurchy, how you doing? The Syracuse football schedule does come out tonight, so that's why it's on your brain. There you go.
That's why it's on my brain. All right, I got football on the brain.
You got it covered. Yeah.
Good reason, man, coming off of the championship weekend of the NFL. Very sorry for your Bills, by the way. I was rooting for them this year.
Yeah. I'm still salty about that one, especially when you watch that AFC Championship game yesterday, and I'm like, oh man, we would have throttled either one of these teams.
I know
mean, they lost to Denver, but you know what I'm saying. Like in that situation, like they would have beat New England.
And I like NFC in the Super Bowl too, but we'll see. We'll see. Sam Darnold always has the possibility to turn back into a pumpkin, so you never know how that's going to go. But
let's go
Seattle,
Seahawks. I'm the biggest Seahawks fan in the world for the next 2 weeks.
Oh, Hawks. Yeah, we definitely don't want New England to win another one. We're in concert on that one, my friend. Okay, but here to talk Syracuse basketball, and the seat is getting warm, as they say. We have been through these troubled times before in both football. Well, mostly in football, I shouldn't say, and basketball.
Right, yeah.
For 50 years. We haven't been in this in a long time in basketball, but we've been through it a lot in the football world in Syracuse, and all the trials and tribulations that the football program has gone through. But now the basketball program at Syracuse finds itself in this precarious position. They decide to go in-house, essentially, coming out of the Jim Boeheim era. The last few years, albeit, and we can both admit this, it was starting to slip a little bit. The magic that Boeheim once had wasn't quite what it once was. And so the thought was here, a change at the top would perhaps reinvigorate this program a little bit. And I think from a recruiting standpoint, Adrian Autry, the new coach, has actually done a pretty good job. But here we are in year 3, and the wins are not coming. And now the torches and the pitchforks, as my old colleague Bud Poliquin used to say, are coming to the JMA and wanting blood. So let's talk about it, Brent. Has Autry done a good job? Let's start there.
I think Autry's done a admirable job, but not a good enough job. That is a team that should be better than they are. That is a team that should have at least 3 or 4 more wins in the bank. I mean, if you want to look at it from a certain point of view, as they said in Star Wars, they have lost a lot of close games. They're not getting their doors blown off here, but this team just had to stack wins, especially, Jim, because as we're approaching February here, the schedule only gets harder. Remember, this team has not played Duke. They have to play North Carolina twice in February. They have to play some really good teams coming up that all kind of fall in that quad 1, quad 2 scenario. Where they sit now, they'd have to win 8 of their last 11 just to get to 20 wins, which is not what it used to be in the world of you win 20 games, you're in the tournament. It's who you beat, right? It's all on who you beat. So that's why it feels like there's still some hope left, because if they can bank a few of these quad 1 wins, they might get themselves into the conversation here. But they have just fallen short in a number of ways to this point, and how they lost some of these games that we talked about. You can't lose to Hofstra at home. The Houston game, you go all the way back to Vegas in November. Free throws matter. That you make your free throws, you win that game, and you got a major quad 1 win in the bank. Autry's substitution patterns I'm still trying to figure them out. I still don't know what level 5 is. I still don't know what the orange standard is. He's breaking the 2-3 zone out of a dusty trunk over the weekend, which, frankly, they kind of needed to do something to interject into the defense. So that's my long-winded way of saying he's done an okay job. But with this team, you have to do a good job in order to make the tournament, especially in an ACC, Jim, that's a lot better this year. This is not the down ACC we've seen the past couple of years.
The thing to me, too, Brent, is really since Syracuse has been in the ACC, and this goes back a ways. This goes back, many years into the Boeheim era. Syracuse just hasn't been the same team. They just haven't in the ACC. I mean, what do they have? one or two, I think 2 wins in the history, or 3 wins in the history of the ACC tournament, which is the big end of year tournament where you're supposed to make a march towards the championship. Syracuse can't beat teams in this division, whether it's up, down, backwards, or upside down. Give me your thoughts on that.
Their first year in the ACC, they finished pretty high. That was the Tyler Ennis team.
Correct.
That bowed out early in the NCAA tournament in Buffalo, if I recall correctly, which was, you can't be losing in Buffalo to, I think it was Dayton. I think that's the team that lost to Dayton, if I'm not mistaken. And all the dates get, mixed up in my head now. Since then, you look at Syracuse in the ACC standings, 8, 9, 10, like they're not getting into the top
Mediocre
5.
at best. Yeah.
It's been mediocre, right? And this is a long time now. This is over a decade that you have been in the ACC. They have not made their way into the top 5 of the standings, and you just said it. They bow out of the ACC tournament early every year. If I'm not mistaken, they have not been to the quarterfinals of the ACC tournament. I know they've not been to the semifinals of the ACC tournament. So think about how often in recent years they've had to go into the ACC tournament and do some damage just to stay in the NCAA tournament conversation. There's been a couple years recently it didn't matter. It was winner take all, but they have not made a mark in that tournament. And that equates to a feeling like you and I go back, and a lot of fans watching and listening to this go back to that feeling of the Big East and not having to go into the Big East tournament to do some damage, although sometimes they did, but that it meant something. And I think that matters. They go into the ACC tournament every year. It doesn't feel like it matters. It's never felt like it's mattered since the minute they got into this league. There's something to that to me.
Yeah. And by the way, they're 5-10 overall in the tournament through last year, and they've only won one. They've never won more than one game in the tournament. So that tells you exactly what we were just talking about, just to put it into numbers. You mentioned the team. I think one of the things to discuss here in terms of whether Adrian Autry deserves to be on the hot seat here is, does this particular team, this year's team, where it sits now, have the kind of talent that should ascend itself beyond mediocre in the ACC and should be a tournament-worthy team? Let me ask your opinion. I mean, we're only, a little more than about halfway through the season. Give me your thoughts about the talent on this SU team, and do you see it from a talent perspective?
From a talent perspective, I do, because you go through it, you've got, now this is all on paper now. We're seeing how this is playing out, of course, as the schedule bears out. But on paper, you have a point guard that's gone through the ACC rigors, right? Nathan George led the ACC in assist rate last year. He knows how to navigate this league. Donnie Freeman is a developing first-round talent. J.J. Starling is a senior guard that averaged 19 points per game last year and can get to the rack and is somebody that can handle this league. You've got a bench that has a terrific three-point shooter in Tyler Betsy, who played in the Big 12 last year. Kyan Anthony, who's a developing talent. Sadiq White, who was a top 50 recruit, if not top 100 recruit, and is an explosive athletic talent. Just go around and look at this team. On paper, they are good enough to compete in this league and to make the tournament, right? Where they have fallen short is a number of things, but Nathan George has turned the ball over too much and tries to be the offense instead of running the offense too much. Their three-point shooting is better on paper, but it's been too inconsistent for, going through the game by game. You just don't know what you're going to get out of this team from a three-point shooting standpoint, and that's not good because they have better three-point shooters, right? They missed Donnie Freeman for 9 games. I understand that, but they held their own without Donnie Freeman as best as you could. He's come back. He's a star. You need a star. You need somebody to anchor on to get through the league, and they have that. So I'm looking at this roster, and I'm thinking about what a different coach would do with it, because I just feel like there was a moment in their last game when Eric Devendorf is doing the broadcast and is kind of throwing up his hands about how Syracuse played in the last minute of the game. Now they're down by 9. Like that's going to be hard to get out of, but he was criticizing. He thought they gave up. Like he flat out said on the broadcast, they're not playing hard enough, right? So that tells me there's a disconnect between Autry and this team, Jim. And you listen to Autry in the post-game press conference, he's like one of my favorite U2 songs. He still hasn't found what he's looking for.
Yeah,
it's like, buddy, it's the end of January. Like, you should have your philosophy down by now. You're just rounding off the edges and trying to kick this thing into gear with the hardest part of your schedule coming up. So that's been the most frustrating thing to me, and I think it's been the most frustrating thing from the fans, Jim. I think last year you knew this team was not good enough. I mean, you could see it. This team is good enough, and that's almost more frustrating when a team that is better is not living up to its capability.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement on that. And, that is the big question is there more talent? It certainly seems like there's plenty of talent on this team. We're talking with Brent Axe, Syracuse.com, Advanced Media New York. It's the Man-Child Show with Boy Green Digital. Don't forget to pop that subscribe button. Become part of our growing community. Today's broadcast is brought to you by our friends at Box Drop Syracuse. We'll hear from them in just a couple of minutes. Following a legend, never an easy thing. This is what Adrian Autry took on. How much do you think that's weighing on him?
I don't think that's weighing on him at all, honestly. It'd be one thing if they parachuted him in following a legend. He sat right next to the legend all those years. He played for the legend, and that's what makes this a little harder. But Syracuse for so long, Jim, has felt like, like a mom and pop grocery store because Jim Boeheim's been running it. And now, there was Jerry McNamara on the staff. There was Adrian Autry on the staff. There was Mike Hopkins on the staff. Go through all the names, right? They kept it in the family for so long. Autry is just now he has his own team now, right? All the remnants of what Boeheim had and what he recruited for Jim Boeheim all gone with the portal era and how rosters turn over as quickly as they do. So not only did Autry have a big hand in what you were saying earlier about how the end of the Boeheim era was sliding, he's now built his own thing, and we're seeing that playing out. So I have seen this string play out here, and short of him making the NCAA tournament, which has always been kind of the line of demarcation, if you will, as John Wildhack said, meaningful games in March, and I don't think he means the NIT in that case. That's where we're at. That's the line you draw. If they somehow make a run and make the tournament, great. You have saved your job. If not, I think we're going to be having a conversation about a new coach. Now, let me throw another twist in the wind here, Jim. Remember, there's a new chancellor coming in. I don't know when, but when that new chancellor comes in, do they keep John Wildhack as the athletic director? Do they restructure the athletic department? What decisions do they make? So when people say, should Adrian Autry be fired? Here's my question to your question. Who's making the call? Because you've got a complete overhaul going from the top down at Syracuse University right now.
Yeah, we've seen it in the past, the meetings with the board of trustees and people from that part of the college community getting in on this decision and offering their thoughts, whether or not this is the right guy or not. Now, you mentioned some of the players. I want to talk about the players a little bit here. Nathan George, here's a guy that they got out of the portal, and Syracuse thought, hey, we've got our point guard. Bingo. Let's plug him in. Let's play. Let's get those assists rolling. Let's set up all these terrific, talented players that we now have on our roster. And, it's been lukewarm, to say the least. I think number-wise, I don't have Nate's numbers in front of me. His numbers are down. So what's going on there?
I think the problem with Nathan George, and he does put up some numbers. There have been a couple of games in ACC play. He's had 11 assists, 13 assists. Like, when he has his moments, Jim, and he runs the team the way a point guard should, you look at it like that's why they went and got him, right? I think the problem has been at Georgia Tech, he ran a more structured offense. Syracuse doesn't have a structured offense. A point guard has to know what buttons to push. So Nathan George has more of a green light to take it to the rack, to take an open three. That's a temptation that some players can't resist, right? This is not our old friend Lazara Sims out there who would look to pass, the first 10 times before he would, concede, like, okay, I guess I'll score, right? So when Nathan George is running the offense and looking for open guys and letting things develop, he's great. I think he's easier to defend than people thought. And there's just times when he kind of ducks his head and goes in the paint, and you're just like, what's the plan here, right? But again, that goes back to coaching because he's got the green light to do that. Syracuse does not have a structured offense. It's just this iso ball, pick and roll offense, which often you see it disintegrate in the second half. That's when coaching really kicks in. That's when coaches make adjustments at halftime because this is what they're doing, and they come out. And I know this is kind of an overrated thing to say at times, but Syracuse just doesn't make the right adjustments. So I think that affects Nathan George and how he's running the show. But boy, I would take him over, no offense to Jaquan Carlos, who just couldn't match up in the ACC last year. Nathan George can. So there's still something in there, and I still think they can bring something out of him here in the last 11 games of the year to run this offense better. But his assist to turnover ratio is just not what you need from a point guard.
Donnie Freeman decided to stay, Brent, and we can see the talent. I mean, you can see it when he's on the floor. Missed a bunch of games. That really, I think, hurt Syracuse, although they seem to survive it fairly well. Now he's back, started like gangbusters. Things have cooled a little bit. Give me your temperature on Donnie Freeman and how he's played so far for Syracuse.
Man, if this team didn't have Donnie Freeman, this would be a worse situation. I mean, for that guy to come out and just, there was a run there where he was averaging about 24 points per game. He is developing into a first-round talent, and he is just a dynamic scorer. But like you said, these teams know Syracuse, and now you've got defenses and coaches that are like, we're not letting this guy beat us. So they're throwing double teams at him. And Donnie's still not quite as physical as you need him to be. And we saw that in the Miami game, Jim. Miami had some redwood trees in the paint. They had some big boys, and they were doubling up Donnie. And the thing with Donnie is if you make him go to his left, he's not quite as effective, right? So you can see the talent. It's off the charts, but there are still parts of his game that have to develop, and that's one of them, right? So now what's happening is if you push him further away from the basket, make him kind of take that fadeaway shot, yeah, that's a 50-50 proposition, but he's a great rebounder. He's a terrific free throw shooter, which Syracuse needs. And what he brings to the table, because J.J. Starling has just not provided this, is a clear go-to guy. Syracuse did not have that in that 9-game stretch that Donnie was out, and certainly missed him last year when he missed most of ACC play, period, with a separate injury than the one he had this year. So that's the good news for Syracuse. They have a guy that can dominate and take over games. The bad news is everybody else knows that, and it's going to challenge Syracuse for somebody else to step up and do it.
Talking with Syracuse.com's Brent Axe, Advanced Media New York. It's the Man-Child Show with Boy Green Digital. Don't forget to like our video by hitting the thumbs up if you like what you're hearing. Today's broadcast brought to you by our friends at Box Drop Syracuse. Brent, we're just going to take 30 seconds, learn a little bit more about our friends from Box Drop. Be right back.
Considering that we sleep nearly 1/3 of our lives, buying the right mattress is essential. At Box Drop Syracuse Mattress and Sofa Outlet, you'll get a unique experience, one that saves you 30 to 70% off retail prices on top-of-the-line mattresses like Sapphire Sleep. At Box Drop, you'll schedule a mattress fitting appointment and get one-on-one service directly with Paul, the owner. No middleman. Family-owned, huge savings, no-pressure sales designed to save you time and money. And now Box Drop Syracuse has sectional sofas and love seats as well, with prices designed to fit your budget. Box Drop Syracuse Mattress and Sofas. Set up your appointment today at boxdropsyracuse.com.
All right, we are back. Man-Child Show with Boy Green Digital at MC Show Digital, our handle on YouTube. Please subscribe. It's absolutely free and become part of our growing community. I'm talking with Brent Axe. It's all things Syracuse basketball. He will dabble in football at the very end. But Brett, let me ask you this. So we spent the beginning of this interview talking about Adrian Autry being on the hot seat. If the university, come the end of this year, were to decide to make a move, my question is, where do they go? I mean, I was very, very intrigued when this job was open initially that, you know, a Rick Pitino type. I always mention him because he's just such a great basketball mind. I know he comes with all the baggage, but man, is he a good coach. You know, that kind of veteran presence, somebody who could really, really command the room, kind of what my New York Football Giants have hopefully now done by getting John Harbaugh in the building. You know, somebody like that, and to do a national search. Syracuse didn't go that route. Will they do that this time? Give me your thoughts on who could potentially, if Autry was let go, become the next coach at Syracuse.
That's my inclination, Jim. And the number one question I get asked these days is, would Jerry McNamara come back from Siena? That is, I get that question 10 times a day now. Of course he would. Do you want to coach at Siena or do you want to coach at Syracuse, right? The question is, who's making the call? And while there could be somebody else making that decision other than John Wildhack, you mentioned it earlier, there's still a board of trustees and a structure in place that thinks a certain way at Syracuse. But I don't think Syracuse should sell itself short here. If you're going to make a move and broaden this thing out. There's a lot of great coaches out there. And the name that goes right to the top of my list, Jim, is Josh Schertz. He's the head coach at St. Louis. He has done an amazing job there. I believe they're 20-1 at this moment, if I'm not mistaken. But he took Indiana State to the NIT. He gets the St. Louis job. He has, now the problem with this is everybody's noticing that. So if you're going to get in the mix for him, there's going to be a few other teams in line, and you're going to have to wait a little bit because they're going to make an NCAA tournament run here, and Syracuse is not going to be the only one who wants his services. So those are two names that pop to mind, but you asked the most important question. Are you going to take, and no, there's no offense to Jerry, but are you going to take the easy way out and just bring in another guy who knows Syracuse, is passionate about Syracuse, can sell Syracuse? But they just did that. They just did that with Autry, and they did it with Jim Boeheim for 45 plus years before that. My preference would be you are Syracuse. You have a top 10 facility in the country in the Mello Center. You're in the ACC. There's always questions about how much Syracuse would pay, right? But you're going to have to, pony up a little bit and pay a coach. Do that. Take a fresh approach to this thing. Widen the net and see who you can get, because there's a lot of great coaches out there.
Any chance you'd go back to the old succession plan? People on our show have brought up the name Mike Hopkins. He's currently with the New Orleans Pelicans, has been in the pros the last couple of years. Obviously had a nice little run there for a bit at Washington, but then things kind of went south and he lost that job. Is Mike Hopkins, you think, even at play? You think he'd even be interested in coming back here and interviewing for this job?
I think it's worth having a conversation. He is a great coach. My thing is, now, I know the Pac-12 doesn't exist anymore as before. Washington's now in the Big Ten. But when Mike Hopkins was there, that was a Power 5, Power 6 level school. He recruited really well. He was the 2-time coach of the year, but there were also some teams he coached out there that he did not get to the level they needed to. Kind of the same conversation we're having about Autry. He had some really good, talented teams that didn't even make the tournament, right? So do you look at that and say, okay, well, he had a test run at about as high a level as you can, and he'll do better this time around in the ACC? Or do you look at it like he did recruit well, he did win Coach of the Year twice, but just fell short in a lot of categories? Now, does Washington have the resources and everything that Syracuse does at this point now in 2026 than when Hopkins was there? I'd love to see Hopkins navigate the portal, which he didn't really get to do it at Washington. Yeah. I think it's an intriguing move. And let's be honest here, Jim, if they brought in Jerry or Hopkins, the fan base would love it. So you're going to just placate's not the right word, but are you just going to bring in somebody is going to be popular, which that's important because people will give him a lot of slack to make this thing work, or do you start over and do the hard thing? That's the hard thing to do.
I thought initially, and I don't remember what you said, so let's rehash it for a minute. But when Autry was hired, I was very disappointed, and not because I don't like the man. He's a very nice man. Red is a very, very good guy, and he's the kind of guy you root for, frankly. It's sad to me to have to discuss him in these terms these days, but this is life in big-time college basketball. Wins equate to staying, and losses equate to looking for somebody else. But I didn't like it. I thought Syracuse should have done a national search, especially coming on the heels of Boeheim, but they didn't go that route. So give me your thoughts. What were your thoughts when Red was hired? Did you think he was bred for success, or did you think, why'd they do this?
I agree with you, and I was on the record with this, that Syracuse needed to do a national search then. Look, they could have done this in 2018. They had a natural break point in 2018. Remember when Jim Boeheim was supposed to step aside and Hopkins kind of threw a monkey wrench in that thing when he took the Washington job, but they still could have held firm on that. Like Jim Boeheim just basically said, no, I need to stay. And John Wildhack was like, no, you could have done it then if you held firm to what the plan was. So now fast forward to when Autry took over. The play then, and I don't even remember the names that were around at that time, but I feel pretty firmly that it's time for Syracuse to look outside the family. Syracuse football did that with Fran Brown. And so far, great year, down year. We'll see what year 3 brings, but I appreciate the new approach that Fran has brought, tapping into the recruiting resources that he has and just looking at it from a different perspective. I think that basketball needs to try that. Basketball for so long, as much as this is a major, big-time ACC Division I program, I'm going to say it again, it's almost felt like a little family grocery store for a while. And there's a lot of alums and former players and everybody that take ownership in this thing, and that's good, and they're passionate about it. But I think they've been selling themselves short about just what Syracuse basketball is, what the brand is, and the type of names you can attract to it.
One more on basketball, kind of a double-edged question here. Maybe it'll result in 2 questions here. The first is we can't have a conversation, especially our first one this basketball season, without talking about Kiyan Anthony, the son of Carmelo. Carmelo, as we have seen, is basically in the dome every game. We are seeing him regularly here in Central New York and Syracuse. We even saw him on the court before a game working with Kiyan. on his game. So talk to me about what you've seen from the youngster and the interesting part of it with his dad actually being around the program almost on a daily basis.
It's been amazing to see Carmelo work with Cayenne. That's happened a couple of times. It's something that takes your breath away. It's just the thing with Cayenne is his game is like a normal freshman. He's a normal freshman that went through a high-level high school program, AAU, the whole thing, comes into Syracuse. There's parts of his game where you see the potential. Miami game, drives down the lane, throws down a dunk. That fadeaway three-pointer that he had, he can hit these shots. But for every one of those shots, there's 4 or 5 where maybe he holds the ball too long, or his three-point shot's not quite refined yet. It's kind of a weak shot. It rims off a lot. Like he's got to snap his follow through and get it. So I'm watching a basketball player who's a project. But when you throw in the equation that his father happens to be the most famous alum in Syracuse history and a Hall of Famer, right, it changes the equation here, and there's a lot of pressure on him. He is a dynamic scorer. He's perfect off the bench for this team. His composure and his energy I've been impressed with so far, but he's that, and that's where he should be. This is not a case of they're not playing him enough or anything. He's right where he should be. He's an intriguing prospect who's still, that's why he's working with his dad before the games. There's just parts of his game that have to be refined. But from a story standpoint, Jim, and just a couple of times I've just posted, shout out to Scott Schild, who's one of our ace photographers at Syracuse.com. He just takes a video of Melo working with Cayenne. And I just throw that up on social media. People are liking it 10 days later. It's a phenomenon. Like there is such interest in this. So it's been fascinating to see the two parts of Cayenne Anthony. There's the basketball player and how he's developing, but then there's this whole other thing about the NIL he gets. There's Melo and Lala sitting courtside every game, the celebrity aspect of it. I can't remember anything like it here at Syracuse.
Now, let me ask the second question off of it, which is, okay, so Carmelo's here. He's a foot soldier essentially in Central New York these days. His son's on the team, so he's committed. I've had people comment on our videos the possibility of Carmelo being the next coach. I think that is absolute insanity to even discuss. It's fun to discuss, but crazy talk, I think. But let me ask you this, I think, more realistic question. If Syracuse decides to go in another direction, is Carmelo somehow involved in the decision to hire the next coach? Does he want to consult? Does he want to is there any, do you think, in Carmelo's body, any wanting to be more highly involved directly with this basketball program? Right now, he's just dead,
I don't think there's any question about it. I mean, his name's on the building. His son's there. He's invested. He's got skin in the game. Cayenne has told me that the other players have sought Carmelo's advice. He's there to offer it. I've seen Carmelo in the locker room a few times talking to guys after games, and he is in it. And by the way, if you're Syracuse, no matter who's making that decision, you'd be smart to loop him in. You would be smart to consult him. Now, I don't think he's ready to coach. Carmelo's got a lot going on. And Carmelo he's got a whole business empire. He's
going.
So if he wants to give all that up and coach, great, because being a coach, like, you got to grind. You got to go to the Peach Jam, and you got to go to all these tournaments, and you got to recruit, and you don't want a figurehead coach. And that's not an insult to Carmelo, but look at like Dwight Freeney and what he does at Syracuse football. That guy's not out there grinding tape, but it's good that you can say Dwight Freeney can consult you, right? That's a great thing. If they want to put Carmelo in a role like that, I'm all for it. And he's essentially in that role now. But anything beyond that, like, you got to understand the work that it takes. But bottom line, like, whoever is making this call, and I know that Autry does talk to him and they get along and they consult. It's not like they ignore him. But if they do make a change, Melo should be involved in it and should be involved going forward.
All right, let me finish up with you by talking a little bit about the Syracuse football program. I mean, so many things. It's an amazing, evolving world, this world of college football. Frankly, Brent, personally, I like it less and less every day. I don't understand why they're not getting some hardcore rules and really making this more understandable for the everyday fan. But that aside, we're in the soup that we're in. They've got the coach that they have in Fran Brown. It went super well the first year, almost unbelievably well. It did not go well this past season. he is, trying to rebuild this thing. He lost his quarterback, so that was a big reason why they fell apart. But I still think with the schedule, it probably would have been an under 500 kind of season regardless. Give me your thoughts. Is Fran Brown getting this ship in order, and can we expect a quick bounce back here in 2026?
Fran Brown went out and did what he had to do in the portal, Jim, and he said he was going to get 2 quarterbacks. Well, I have 2 and you can have 3. One of the dumbest expressions in the history of football is if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. I think Syracuse found out that philosophy is ridiculous last year, because when Steve Angeli went down, boy, that thing just fell apart. And look, they did what on paper a lot of teams were doing. Well, let's bring in this guy from LSU who had Elite 11 credentials and just couldn't quite crack the rotation at LSU. No harm, no foul. A lot of great players don't. And rock and roll. They did it the year before. Kyle McCord just didn't quite make it at Ohio State, and that was the perfect portal plan. Well, you found out, and Cignetti says this a lot, Jim, and I appreciate that Fran Brown is now taking this philosophy. Production over potential. Syracuse went out, and if you look at the portal, a lot of guys that they're trying to elevate. The quarterback they got from Kennesaw State, Amari Odom, won a Conference USA title, has played in college football games. He was the player of the year in that league. Production. He's been on the field. So if he gets called into action, as Steve Angeli, remember, is still rehabbing from that ACL injury, he may or may not be ready to run the show at camp. It depends on how his rehab goes. You've got Amari Odom, who was on the field last year. They brought in Danny Lauder from Georgetown, who has played 15 college football games. Now, that's not the ACC, but I'd rather have a guy who's been on the field. Malachi Nelson's kind of a wild card, because Malachi Nelson 3 years ago was like the next, Caleb Williams, right? Yeah. California guy, number 1 player in the country. Like, they thought he was going to be the whole world. Well, he's now at his 4th school. Like, he couldn't stick at UTEP as the starter. But you know what? Somebody's been on the field and he's got talent. So if, God forbid, they start going through the list again, they've got 3 guys in the room that have been there and done that. They're not putting a lacrosse player on the field. So I was impressed with that. The one thing I'm a little concerned about, Jim, is they only went and got 1 offensive lineman. Now there's 19 in the room, but I think Fran's putting a little too much of his chips in the middle of the table, that of the players they have in the facility, if you will, they'll find 5 starters left to right.
5 good ones.
I'm not so confident in that.
Yeah.
But you had to spend your money somewhere in the portal, and they invested it in the most important position in the game, and I'm good with that.
Yeah. And it looks like he continues to be very good with the youngsters on the recruiting trail. We keep hearing about even guys into 2027 that are prominent guys. I think right now they're ranked something like 6th overall in 2027 class. So
third
guy
most
keeps
commits.
busy. Fran Brown, the recruiter. I don't have any doubts about Fran Brown, the recruiter.
No.
I still have my head scratching moments about Fran Brown, the coach, and I think that's kind of where I settle at the moment with him. But he's still young, and it's way too early for me to cast judgment on him one way or the other. What do you think about that?
Well, and that's the important thing that he did as well. So 1A in the offseason moves department was bringing Vince Karras in here, who fits that category as well. You're trying to elevate Vince Karras from the MAC to the ACC. Now, you know what they call the MAC, the cradle of coaches. So many great college coaches, it feels like, started in the MAC or kind of built themselves up. But Toledo, Jim, consistently has had a top 5, top 10 defense in all of Division I. He is sending guys to the National Football League. There's 3 or 4 guys that are in the combine kind of pro football like machine, if you will, leading up to the draft. Vince Karras is a great defensive coach. Elijah Robinson was not. Fran Brown hired his buddy, who was a great recruiter, and hoped
that was not an easy let go for sure.
It was not. It was not. And I get why he brought him in. You know, when you get hired as a head coach, you go in your inner circle and you feel like these are guys that can elevate. Robinson's just not a play caller. He's a great defensive line coach. He's also a terrific recruiter. But Vince Karras has been there and done that. So for Fran Brown to go get a defensive coordinator of that level, who Nebraska really wanted too, Matt Rule really wanted him at Nebraska, that was a major, major move. So per what you said, Fran's still kind of figuring out the game day stuff. So surround people around you that have been there and done that. Juan Castillo is another example of that. I mean, it's an offensive line coach. He's been everywhere. You look at Castillo's resume, it reads like an old phone book, right? But at least you're bringing in people with more experience that Fran Brown can consult with, and they can help stabilize the football stuff while Fran does recruit and plays the CEO role as the head coach.
You know, my biggest worry with Fran is whether or not Syracuse gets to see his full evolution, because if he has another good one, you know, the Sharks will be circling and the money will be out there. And I know he has preached loyalty, but I heard that speech that Doug Marrone gave when he stepped to that podium the first time he became Syracuse host. I've waited my whole life. I envisioned it. And then 4 years later, Buffalo Bills, I'm out of here. You know, I just think, you know, it's hard for these guys to turn down the kind of perks and money that these big programs can throw at them if they think they're worthy.
Well, and let's face it, it could go the other way. If they have another year where they struggle and they can't find another Demetrius Samuel, Antoine Delorier type from the freshman class, and they're just not hacking it. And look, Syracuse just doesn't have the NIL resources that the top level of the ACC does. They do okay. They're not at the bottom of the pack, but they're not at the top of the pack either. So they are showing that they can't hang. And this schedule's not quite as tough as last year, but it's nothing to brush aside. Like, they're finishing the year against Notre Dame at the Dome. Like, that could be a pretty big game for both teams at the end of the season. So this is a big year. This is a big year in a lot of ways. Can Fran rebuild? Can Fran keep the money train rolling? Can Fran coach? There's a lot of questions about what he can continue to do here. And like you said, if he's successful again, then Fran Brown's agent is Jimmy Sexton, Lurchie, who is he's got all the big names, and he'll be he'll be selling his guy. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, Notre Dame end of the year, that'll be a nice chance for Steve Angeli's revenge. Remember, he didn't play in that blowout this year at Notre Dame, you know, and I'm sure he wanted to get his claws into his old team. So maybe another year of development, maybe a little bit better roster around him. Maybe Steve Angeli gets his revenge, and maybe, like you said, it's a meaningful game at the end of the year. I guess time will tell. Brent Axe, always great to talk to you, my friend. Thank you for carving out a little time for us today.
My pleasure, Jimmy. Tell Boy Green I said hello, and great to be back with you here.